going to kick off on it.
That's you.
Right. Hi everyone, welcome to another session with myself and Piers. Today we're here to talk about data classification. Piers, over to you. This is your idea.
Yeah, so we're really looking at the data classification product set that we have and how that name might not be entirely up to date, and we'll go into that during the presentation.
Okay. So just quickly, quick introduction to host today. My name's Ian Davis. I'm one of the partner managers here at Fortra, looking after data security specifically, with a background squarely in data protection. Piers, do you want to give yourself an intro as well? Do it better than I will.
Okay, just one sentence. So yeah, I'm the Piers Chivers. I'm the product manager for the data classification suite of products delivered by Fortra. And by the end of the webinar, I may have a different role. Back to you, Ian.
So today, in today's discussion, and this is really just a discussion, we want to keep this light and informal. It's not your typical sort of webinar where we're death by PowerPoint. But like Piers alluded to, we really want to discuss how the term data classification has been hijacked by other vendors, other solution providers, that may not be doing everything that you believe classification should. We're then just going to talk about what we view data classification is, and like I said, this is our opinion on what it should be and what it should be used for. Moving into the sort of the data lifecycle and how classification fits into it, and some use cases. And then at the end of the session, we're gonna need some help because, like I said, the name's been hijacked. And maybe it's time for a new name. Things have moved on since classification was introduced, and maybe we need to reevaluate what it's called and give it a new image and brand. So over to you, Piers.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, if you recall last webinar we did, Ian, I did have a go at Gartner. So this week, it's Forrester's turn. Because I was reading a research report by Forrester about data protection generally, but data classification was covered. And I looked at the vendors they were referring to, and I looked down them, and they were data governance people and data discovery vendors. And I looked at them and thought, they don't do data classification. So it is a very odd list. And in fairness to Forrester, when you go to some of the websites of these vendors, and they're good products, good companies, no issue with that, they do say they do data classification. And as part of my job, I research what they do, and I often go and think, oh, there's another company saying they do data classification. I'll have a look at what they do. And frankly, they don't. And I'll come to, in just a moment, as you said, what we think data classification is, and why I don't think some of the data governance and discovery vendors and the analysts, following on from that, are really using the term appropriately. I don't know if you had any other examples around here, Ian?
Well, actually, off the back of what you just said, so some of these vendors that state that they have the classification functionalities and tool sets, they're actually complementary to what we do, right? Their solution kind of sets the groundwork for what we believe classification, and we'll talk about that in the coming slides. But actually, from the other point of view, and point 3 here is kind of the gist of this of what we're discussing today is we kind of need to call it what it is, right? And if I don't like picking on Microsoft, but if I use Microsoft as an example, they don't allude to doing data classification, do they, Piers? They do the sort of
sensitivity labels. Yeah.
Sensitivity labeling. Thank you. I had a bit of a mind blank then, coming over COVID. They call it sensitivity labeling, which is exactly what their tool does. It doesn't do granular, sophisticated metadata classification. It provides a sensitivity label that powers the Microsoft suite of products, RMS, for example. And that's kind of what we need to do, really, is identify a name that says exactly what we do. yeah, no, I completely agree. The amount of times I am with partners and they have been told or led to believe that a solution they've sold to a customer does classification, and it doesn't. It does a degree of categorization, and that's where their functionality stops. So yeah, we kind of need to sort of re-educate and just make sure that people are aware of what they're deploying in their security ecosystem to kind of make sure they're getting the best protection, really.
Okay, so I'll take this one if you like. So it is, we see people wanting to do what we call data classification, sort of fit into three camps, if you like, and sometimes they're in more than one of these camps. So there's compliance. You're obliged through statutory laws to meet the laws such as GDPR or CCPA and so on. Then there's regulatory, which is sort of a similar, but there's a regulator who's enforcing your use of sensitive data, PHIs, as protected health information. There's then you might have to comply with an organization who state that to do business with them you have to have an ISO 27001 certificate, and or you may be mandated by a supply chain or someone you are supplying to, like for example government, who say that you should deal with their classified information appropriately and provide them with an indication of what the sensitivity and the type of information you are providing to them. There's then those who fit into the sort of motivated to do data classification because they have high value intellectual property. Obviously, many companies do, and some wish to protect that intellectual property using data classification as a driver for that. They also need to know where their sensitive data is. A surprising number of companies, large or small, who don't really know where their sensitive information is, and that if you can find it, you need to classify it and make sure that it's staying in the right place. Also, they may be motivated because they understand that this gives them a competitive advantage if they can make use of the benefits of data classification. And as follow on to that, likewise, the opposite flip side to that coin is that you need to stop potentially getting very big fines from the Information Commissioner's Office here in the UK or the similar regulators in other jurisdictions. And there's then, of course, zero trust, which is a bit of a theme at the moment. Zero trust is all about knowing what you have and protecting it appropriately within the constraints of a small network, if you like, or a small environment. I don't know, Ian, did you have any sort of follow up on that?
Yeah,
one?
I mean, my partners are big on zero trust at the moment. There's lots of vendors providing zero trust access to their to customers, and that is a large journey that end users have to go down. But it all starts around understanding what data you have and where it resides in your network, and then providing a categorization for that network, for the data that you hold. You cannot start a zero trust journey or have a zero trust framework in place in your organization without doing the foundations of data classification. It just cannot happen. So if this is something that you're interested in, then having the categorization and the classification is mandatory for an organization.
Yeah, and then the final camp that many organizations sit into, and as I say, there is oftentimes in more than one camp, is the good idea. It's a good idea to do data classification. You might have an auditor, be they internal or external, who recommends best practice involves classifying your data or information. There are certifications like ISO 27001, which dictates, probably too strong a word, but they strongly recommend that you should be doing data classification. And this it all helps reduce the business risk. If you know, you can't calculate risk if you don't know what you're dealing with, the impact and the likelihood of the impact. And again, it does help in terms of helping if you're potentially moving towards an acquisition. then it does help to inform the people who may be acquiring you, or if you're acquiring someone else, they need to know what they've got in terms of literally the value of their data. And you haven't classified it appropriately. How do you know? You can only put your finger in the air and guess. So yeah, is there anything else there, Ian, before I move on?
Yeah, I mean, on the business value, like you said, if you're being acquired or moving to IPO, for example, a business that knows what it's got is going to be far more valuable than a business that hasn't got a clue, right? And especially a business that has all these guardrails and frameworks around their data is going to be more valuable. But it's also providing that return on investment to other security vendors that a business may have invested in. So 9 times out of 10, when we talk about data classification, it's because a DLP tool has been procured and configured incorrectly and therefore is operating not as efficiently as it could be. And mostly I see customers putting it into safe mode because the false positives are just far too high, and it's costing them too much money and time to manage that false positives and quarantine. So, classification is in place with the metadata that powers the downstream technology that makes sure that you are getting more out of these other solutions. So this could be, like I said, DLP, you reduce the false positives, encryption can work better if it's got more information provided to it on what the data is. For a fraction of the price of these much larger tools, classification can actually help get a better return on that initial investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a great segue to the next slide, which is our view of what data classification is. And this is really the center point of this presentation. I would say as well, we should have said, if you have a view on what you think data classification is, please use the chat if you're watching live, or if it's on a recording, perhaps in a LinkedIn link or some such, then please add your comments to this. Really interested to hear what you think data classification is. But I will tell you, my understanding is that it involves visual markings, metadata, and user awareness. And before I go into the details of those, I just want to bring out an example using Julius Caesar, the Roman emperor or rather the emperor of the Roman Empire. So did he do data classification, Ian, you're asking? Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
I wonder where you go with this.
When he used to send envelopes to the far reaches of the Roman Empire, they would be sealed, a wax seal. So was that visual marking? Yes, it was. Envelope, wax seal, pretty obvious. Was there metadata? Yes, it had his head stamped in the wax seal. Did that help user awareness? Well, if you got an envelope from Julius Caesar, you're either getting a promotion or having your head chopped off. So you're going to open the envelope, PDQ. Yes, that's user awareness. So this goes back a long time. If we fast forward, say, a couple of thousand years, say, typically data classification comes from the defense and military environments, where they literally put a classification value on their information, be it secret or top secret or some such. Of course, in the more modern world, in the electronic world, data classification is far more nuanced, which brings me to the points on the slide. So yeah, in visual markings, I mean adding a marking to the header and footer of an Office document or a PDF, for example. Adding a visual marking to a subject line or the first line in an email body. And this can drive what we call downstream users. So, for example, you may be communicating with someone who isn't using a classification tool. Heavens forbid. But then there are people out there who don't. And if they get this email, say, with a visual marking, they know the sensitivity and the handling needs around that content. So it is for human beings, should we say. Of course, it's not mandatory all the time. In fact, on occasion, you may not wish to mark your content to indicate the sensitivity. One example I have is a government organization who sends to citizens content from their environment, and they don't want to have that very formal sensitivity label on the letter that they send out. because it may frighten the citizens who are getting it. So you need to have that flexibility as well as the ability to set it. And then, of course, we come to metadata. This is machine readable metadata. It's for what you were just talking about, Ian, the downstream tools such as Fortra's Digital Guardian DLP system, or others such as we have our information rights management Vera tool, can be driven from the classification value metadata that's been applied. And metadata may be X headers in email, it may be custom document properties in Office documents and so on. And it has to be persistent. Some of the discovery vendors I talked about, they say they understand and can classify information, but generally they're just tagging it in their own database. The metadata, they don't have metadata, they don't apply it to the content per se. And finally, as I said, that user awareness, we touched on this on the last presentation. I passionately believe that you cannot have a secure organization without educating your employees around security. You don't run a hospital and not tell people how to deal with medicine. You don't run a secure organization and don't tell people how to do security. So if you're obliging people to think about the sensitivity and the handling rules around your content every time they save a document, every time they send an email, of course they're going to be aware of the security of your information. You then have the policy checks as well. The famous, we all know, we've probably all done it. I certainly have done it. Luckily, I had software that stopped it following through, but I sent some sensitive information to the wrong person. It was a Steve. It was wrong Steve. And you want that policy check to pop up and say, oops, are you really sure? Doesn't seem quite right.
And it's normally right because the distribution lists don't necessarily show everyone in it. You might have a consultant who potentially is outside, not internal, and you want to make sure that it's going to the right people. So sometimes it's not a obvious mistake like the wrong Steve, right? It can be quite an easy mistake to make, and it happens all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's that user awareness which helps the organization get to a better place in terms of its security posture or exposure. And of course, it's got to be easy to use. I don't pretend otherwise. We don't all want to be sitting there necessarily saying personally identifiable information or payment card information or intellectual property, as I said on the market drivers on the last slide. We don't necessarily, that isn't our day job as such. So it has to be easy to use. We have to give the capability for the user to easily select that, or on occasion pre-select, let the business pre-select for the end user. Go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, and the thing on this as well, going back to the first point on user awareness, is because it's easy to use, and our tools especially, is the hints and tips that we can provide. If the user is unsure about the classification of the document that they're creating or handling or manipulating, whatever it is, then we can provide these tips to help them choose the correct classification. So we're helping them make the right decision rather than them accidentally doing the wrong thing. So again, it comes down to that mitigating the risk because it is easy to use.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just the final point to say is if as a customer you're sitting there with a vendor telling you they're doing data classification, ask them, do you put visual markings on the content you've classified? Have you added metadata, persistent metadata especially, that goes with the content wherever it flows? And how is your data classification helping your users become aware of security? So I think those three questions really should inform the vendor whether they are doing data classification or not. I think
I was just going to say, it comes onto this slide as well, actually. There is one part that harks around those 3 points, the sort of vision markings, metadata, and user sort of user awareness. And that's how you report on it. You need to understand, and it sits on this slide, you need to understand how those users are creating data, manipulating it, and sharing it, etc. From a threat detection point of view and user behavior awareness, you want to know that if you have a malicious user, you want to see that someone is taking a classified document at 3 a.m. in the morning and downloading it to public. right? Because you can use that in an SCM or a SIEMT or a UABA or a EDR, whatever it is, but you can export that event log information to create wider context of what's going on, because that could be malicious activity. Maybe someone's had their credentials stolen, or it just might be someone making a mistake. We don't know. But at least if you're reporting on it, you can identify it. If you're not reporting on it, then that potentially could lead to a breach. Anyway, so I love this slide. I talk about it all the time. Historically, whenever I've been presented the life cycle of data, it's always been linear. It's always been from left to right, start to finish, or at least that's how it's displayed or illustrated. And it's not. The data life cycle is circular. There is no start, there is no finish. We're creating unstructured data at a phenomenal rate on a daily basis, and you need to keep going around the wheel. So, talking about classification, and when we talk about how the name has been hijacked, we've got some really great vendors out there that have got phenomenal solutions. They do a great job, but what we find anyway is that they are advertising the fact that they are doing step 1, step 2, and step 3 on this slide. And really, when you look under the bonnet, they're doing a fantastic job of step 1. They're doing a good job of step 2, but they do not do step 3. And that's the problem, is that you're not providing that visual marking, the granular metadata, to the data, so that you cannot have an efficient wheel. It becomes hexagon and it doesn't move easily, right? So the protect part of the stage, where you've got CASB or DLP or encryption, whatever it is, if it hasn't got that metadata, it's got to work so much harder to understand the data that's passing through the perimeter, or should be blocked, or whatever it might be. So having a true classification solution to apply the right metadata, and it's got to be granular as well. We've got to understand exactly what it is, and we'll come on to that in a second. That's what provides the protection at step 4, because the DLP tool is gonna find it so difficult to apply the right level of protection, which is why you get false positives, if it doesn't understand the data in the first place. So, but at Fortra, we have solutions that can cover the whole life cycle. So if you do have any questions, please reach out to us in the chat, or like I said, if this is a recording, on the LinkedIn comments, and we'll definitely come back to you. I think from now, we've got some use cases to discuss, right? Piers?
Yep, absolutely.
So, I mean, we've always, like I said, we talk about DLP being the reason people procure classification, and it is. A lot of the time, DLP, unfortunately, has led to classification always seen as kind of as a nice to have, and customers really don't see it as a prerequisite to securing the data within their environment, because DLP vendors have sold their solution as a way to stop data from egressing out of the environment. And it doesn't matter, and they would say it doesn't matter about the classification, because we can handle it. We can do a content scan and ensure that there's nothing sensitive or IP or whatever it might be leaving the environment. And as a result, like I said, classification unfortunately has become, in the eyes of the customer, nice to have, but that's not the case. It is a standalone solution that doesn't just power DLP. It's got benefits for DLP, but other downstream technology within the security ecosystem will also benefit from having that granular metadata. So if we think about the wheel, here at Fortra, we sell a lot of managed file transfer. Now, managed file transfer is quite a simple solution. It has some security components to it. If managed file transfer can realize that the data that it's being passed to transfer outside of the organization or internally, whatever it might be, if it can pick up on the fact that it's got a sensitivity label to it, then it can understand that maybe it needs to be sent via a more secure protocol, or via a different method, or maybe it can't even be shared with that server or that person, for example. So that's just one example where we're using the metadata to derive downstream technology within Fortra, but it could be governance or archiving or encryption, whatever it might be. If we can understand the data better, then the downstream technology is going to have less effort to do that job itself. It doesn't have to do the content scan, and there's going to be less mistakes made, and therefore the risk is reduced. So for me, classification plays an important, pivotal role within a wider data security ecosystem. It's kind of the foundation. It's the cornerstone, as you might say, for building that security ecosystem.
And I guess it's worth saying as well that I did stress earlier about user awareness, but the business can set the persistent metadata that drives these downstream tools, such as managed file transfers, for example. The business can do that and not necessarily involve the end user. Yeah. So there is much benefit for the business as an organization, as a security organization, to take from data classification over and above educating the users and asking the user to make a choice about what they're dealing with. You want a real balance, I think, between the users and the business to enable, as you said, those downstream security enforcing capabilities.
Yeah.
Shall I go to the second? Sorry, I crushed that. Okay if I go with another use case?
Talking to me about the chaperone use case before, so it's quite interesting to ask and say, why don't you tell me more about that?
Yeah, okay. So it's a slight switch, if you like. So some of our customers do what we call chaperoning. So this is, especially in the US financial industry, financial sector, they have a law that says that, for example, a foreign bank cannot sell to US customers unless they are chaperoned by a US bank. It's a very simplistic way I've expressed that, because there are nuances to that scenario. But let's work with that's it in principle, if you like. And if you were the customer and I was someone from the foreign bank, I would need to have a physical chaperone, as the name suggests, to communicate with you, to ensure that all the right regulations and procedures are being followed. And in a virtual or a physical meeting, that's obvious. But how does that work in the electronic world, or in email especially? So with Fortra's data classification suite, we have a capability to recognize when who's talking to whom and whether they need to involve a chaperone. And on occasion, I know with one business we work with, they add the manager of an individual, and the manager has to authorize that the communication can happen. That's a chaperone that's happening there. And it doesn't sound, it isn't traditional data classification, if you like, but it is, as we said, driving a business use case using the information that you're dealing with and the people who are handling that information. So it kind of is the cornerstone of data classification. And I noticed, interestingly, I don't know if you got the memo, but the UK left the EU a while back. We did. And I saw just in the news recently that chaperone concept is sort of coming in between UK and EU market sectors or financial sectors as well, for the same sort of reasons. So I thought that was an interesting use case and slightly different that people might be interested in.
And also, like, that moves away from the point of having, data classification historically comes from having that big, James Bond top secret visual marking. That's down to the metadata in the background, right? The driving the chaperone notification that a manager needs to be involved in that communication. So, and again, this use case, I have to thank my father-in-law for this, right? Because it's a very bizarre use case, and I don't think many people have come across it. But again, it comes down to not really the visual markings and more about the metadata that plays a part in driving downstream technology. So in this particular use case, and you have to bear with me, I think it's a bit of a long story, but in this particular one, a legal firm needed to protect the data that they have in a physical way from egressing out of the organization in a physical way, and in the electronic way. So, if we cover the electronic format first, they deployed a DLP and a CASB and encryption and all the right things there to prevent data leaving their organization. Because they're a legal firm, they are making sure that sensitive legal documents don't get out to the public. However, those physical documents, they needed to make sure that people weren't going to walk out with a printed copy of the contract or something that was going on in the law courts, whatever it might be. And so my father-in-law, he was actually working for a company at the time that was selling paper that had electromagnetic wire as part of the production process in the paper and when it was milled. So this paper was in certain printers in certain trays. So if someone was trying to print a document that was classified as top secret or internal, then the classification tool was able to tell the printer to use the correct paper that had this electromagnetic wire in it only, and not normal paper. So the document was printed, and it could have been printed with a visual marking or without a visual marking, probably with, just in case something was left on the desk. But then because it had this electromagnetic wire that gave off a unique signal, if that paper was tried to remove from the building, they had the sensors that you get in your shopping mall and in Tesco's and stuff like that, and in Walmart. And as someone would leave the exit of the building, it would trigger an alarm. So it didn't matter whether the paper was scrunched up, held in tin foil, in a briefcase, no matter what it was, you couldn't get that piece of paper out of the organization. I thought it was a really, really powerful example of where classification has been used to drive downstream technology, but not in an electronic way, your typical sort of DLP and encryption, but an actual physical real life. Because we all see these examples where, I think it happened recently, where the Met left a stack of papers at a bus stop. And this is a good example of how we could prevent sensitive data leaving the four walls, which are the old school secure perimeter would have been those four walls of buildings, prevent sensitive data actually leaving the organization. So I've always thought that's a really powerful example of how classification can be used in that scenario.
Yeah, it is. And as you said, it tips across into the physical world. I think that's a real great example of where the hard copies need to be protected just as much as soft copies. I know back in the day, decade or two ago, we were all going to be working in a paperless office. I don't know about you, Ian, but I'm surrounded by paper as I speak. So yeah, hard copies are as frequent as ever. And yeah, I think that's a great example. And I do, while you were talking, it did come to me that maybe the export control vendors who if they divulge the wrong information to the wrong nationality, it can be an $80 million fine, that sort of thing. Yeah. So and divulging could be electronically, and we certainly have the software to stop that. But it can also involve, as you said, the physical printouts as well. So yeah, interesting.
And it's complete. It's accidental behaviour. It could be malicious, right? It absolutely could be malicious. Someone prints off if we go away from that environment, it could be an engineering firm that maybe have designed the next best electric vehicle technology, right? They've got the best battery designs, and it's all on CAD, and it's taking it out of the factory via paper because they're aware of the DLP and the rights management and the CASB. That actually the old school might be the easiest way to get the document out. And actually, this is a great way to protect your IP as well, not just sensitive data. So, yeah, I thought it was a fantastic story, and I think it's got so many more use cases. So it brings us nicely onto our next point. So that the term data classification applies to having a visual marking, right? And we've kind of moved on from having visual markings being the the reason why we sell this product. It's as we go into this electronic and world of digitalization, that actually it's this powerful metadata that drives downstream technology and helps power your security ecosystem. So is classification still the right term for the solution? And I guess this is where we also need you guys as listeners to maybe help us out a little bit. Maybe you can think of something a bit better than we can. We're not the best marketeers, but some things we came up with, like data DNA, for example, or one that I particularly like is the identity. Giving data an identity rather than this classification. And we've discussed it as well, Piers, like similar to like having a passport, right? Your passport has even just looking at the front cover, by having looking at the front cover, we can see them from the UK. Okay, they've changed colour now, so you can see they're not part of the EU. And we open it up to the second page. There's a picture, there's a passport number, there's an address, there's a place of birth, there's a date of birth. And quite quickly, you can understand where I'm allowed to go and where I'm not allowed to go. But by running it through the machine, you can also then see what visas are applied and where I'm not permitted, and maybe I've been banned from going to the US because I did something silly. I don't know. But this whole idea of having an identity around the data actually is more applicable now, right? Because this is what we're doing with our metadata. It's not just about giving it that top secret stamp. There's a lot more to it, right?
Yeah, so just pick out some things you said there. You said DNA for data, which I kind of like, but it's a bit medical. So I get where you're coming from. And you mentioned data identification as well. Again, a bit broad. And then you mentioned the passport sort of concept, which I do like because it does hint at a passport, as you say, it has metadata on it. It actually literally says whether you're allowed in the country or not at the immigration border control. And work with me here, but it could be, you could call that a guardian to the country, and if it's the electronic world, you could call them a digital guardian. You see what I did there?
I know where you went. Yeah.
And that passport is actually determining whether or not you can get past the immigration control. And I suspect, I don't know, but I've always suspected that when you hand over your passport and they scan it through the little machine, up pops, hopefully says, in my case, Piers Stewart, good guy, on you go. But I assume they go off to Interpol and say, is he wanted by the European or UK authorities, law enforcement authorities? So it's really, and it's gone off to a big database, but Interpol database in the sky, and the passport itself has really been used to get back additional metadata over and above the person that stood in front of the immigration border control officer. Yeah. And it's kind of gone off to a metadata cloud, if you like, to inform about the person who stood there in front of the border control. So I like your information, I don't know if you use this phrase, information passport suggestion. I'm not sure I'm not sure product manager for information passport suite of products is, I'm not quite getting that, but
and also the acronym, how does your information passport, your IP, protect your IP?
Yeah, we're getting into circles of IP, but
we're not marketeers though, Piers. It's not a problem.
Yeah, well, we can borrow the expertise of people watching now, and also, as you said, on links, if they can put down, keep it clean, please, the suggestions for maybe how we should change the data classification name. I will say I was teasing Forrester, of course. I understood where they were coming from, but the name has been hijacked to a large degree by the discovery vendors, especially in some of the data governance people, to do what isn't really. I don't think they're doing data classification, but more, especially, and you said this, we're not doing it anymore. We're doing far more. We're far more nuanced. We're far more sophisticated. We're enabling those border control guards. We're enabling the information rights management and managed file transfer. So data classification, the traditional, what I call data classification, is really an enabler for in helping your data security or your organization's security. So yeah, it'd be great to come up with a new name that captures all of that. It's a challenge.
I'll
but
tell you what, let's give our marketeers a headache, a heartache. Should we have a competition? So you can come up with the best name for our new data classification solution. Maybe win a Amazon voucher or TV. No, we're joking. You won't win anything. But any suggestions are you won't win anything. There's no competition. But any suggestions?
Will you win anything or not?
No.
Okay, right. But now, what you will win is if the term sticks, you will win fame and everlasting glory. How about that? So, absolutely. So please do put your suggestions in the chat as we speak and elsewhere.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of brings us nicely on, and sums it up. I mean, in summary, what we kind of said is back at the beginnings of data classification, when it was just visual markings for mainly military, as you pointed out, right? They were the biggest customers back in the start of Bolden James and Titus days, and we've now taken it on so much further. It's moved away from that visual markings, and yeah, we just kind of feel that we need to take it further as well, and potentially look at a new way it's purveyed and educate customers that it's not just around DLP, that there's far bigger advantages and reasons why to deploy a classification solution. So yeah, if you've enjoyed this discussion, comments in the chat or in the comment section of this LinkedIn. But also, Piers and I are always open to discuss things that you want to hear about. So if you've got any ideas of other opinions from us, any other ideas for these type of webinars, let us know, and we'll be happy to put these in future sessions. We would like to make these more regular. I don't know about you, Piers, but I quite enjoy these quite informal chats. So yeah, help us out. Let us know what you want to hear about, and we'll be happy to oblige. But in the meantime, thank you for joining. I hope you've enjoyed it. And yeah, we'll be back with your questions soon. Thank you very much. Have a good day.